Nobody visited me for 6 years. Not on my birthdays. Not on Thanksgiving. Not even when I was rushed to the hospital after collapsing in my kitchen. But the moment they heard I had money, they suddenly remembered I existed. My name is Linda Carter. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. For most of my life, I believed family was everything. I was the kind of mother who sacrificed without keeping score. The kind who skipped buying herself new clothes so her children could have better ones. The kind who worked double shifts at a nursing home, then came home and cooked dinner with aching feet. I raised 2 children alone after my husband, Mark, passed away from a heart attack when he was only 47. I thought all those sacrifices meant something. I was wrong. The distance didn't happen overnight. At first, my son Brian and daughter Melissa called every week, then every month, then only on holidays, then not at all. Whenever I tried reaching out, there was always an excuse. Sorry, Mom, we're busy. We'll visit soon. Things are crazy right now. Weeks became months. Months became years. Meanwhile, I sat alone in the same house where I had raised them. The house was full of memories and completely empty of people. I spent Christmas mornings staring at unopened gifts I'd bought for children who never came. I baked birthday cakes and ended up giving most of them to neighbors. Some nights I sat by the living room window, watching cars pass by, wondering if one of them might be theirs. It never was. Eventually, I stopped expecting them. That was the hardest part, not the loneliness, the acceptance. Accepting that the people you would die for wouldn't drive 20 minutes to see if you were alive. The only person who regularly checked on me was my neighbor, Sarah. She was 35, worked as a school teacher, and had become more like family than my own children. Every Sunday, she brought coffee and sat with me on the porch. One afternoon, she asked a question nobody else had ever bothered to ask. Linda, does it hurt? I looked at her. What hurts? The way they treat you. For a moment, I couldn't answer. Because if I answered honestly, I would cry. And once I started crying, I wasn't sure I could stop. So I smiled and said I was fine. But I wasn't. A few months later, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from an attorney in Chicago. At first, I thought it was a scam. Then he mentioned a name I hadn't heard in nearly 40 years. My Uncle Robert. A wealthy businessman who had never married and had no children. I nearly dropped the phone when the attorney explained why he was calling. My uncle had passed away, and, according to his will, he had left me nearly $2 million. I remember sitting frozen in my kitchen chair. $2 million. The number didn't seem real. I wasn't rich. I was a retired nursing assistant living on a modest pension. I checked every dollar before spending it. Yet suddenly, everything had changed. What I didn't know was that news travels fast, especially when money is involved. And before long, people who hadn't spoken to me in years began finding my phone number again. The first call came 3 days later. When I saw Brian's name appear on my screen, my heart nearly stopped. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe he missed me. Maybe he finally wanted his mother back. I answered immediately. What he said next would change everything. Mom. The excitement in Brian's voice almost sounded genuine. For a moment, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to believe it. Maybe he really had missed me. Maybe all those years apart had finally made him realize what mattered. Brian, I said softly. How are you, Mom? I've been worried about you. Worried. The word nearly made me laugh. This was the same son who hadn't visited in almost 6 years. The same son who never returned my calls. The same son who hadn't shown up when I spent 3 days in the hospital. Yet suddenly he was worried. We exchanged small talk for a few minutes. Then came the real reason for the call. So, I heard about Uncle Robert. There it was. The reason. Not me. The money. I felt something inside me sink. Oh, I replied calmly. Yeah. Melissa told me. That's incredible, Mom. A few seconds later he added, Actually, Emily and I have been struggling financially. Emily was his wife. We've got some debts. The kids need things. The mortgage has become difficult. I listened quietly. Then he asked the question I already knew was coming. Maybe you could help us out? Not how have you been? Not can I come see you? Not I miss you. Just money. 2 days later, Melissa called. The conversation was almost identical. She talked about inflation, bills, college expenses, and how hard life had become. Then she gently suggested that family should help family. Family. Interesting word. For years, I wasn't family enough to visit. Now I was family enough to finance their lives. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. The phone rang constantly. My children called. My grandchildren called. Even relatives I hadn't heard from in decades suddenly wanted to reconnect. Birthday wishes arrived. Flowers appeared at my door. Cards filled with loving messages showed up in my mailbox. The affection felt strangely familiar. Not because I'd experienced it recently, because it reminded me of salespeople trying to earn a commission. Every conversation eventually led back to money. Always money. One Saturday afternoon, Brian showed up unexpectedly. The first visit in 6 years. I opened the door and barely recognized him. He hugged me tightly. A little too tightly. As if he was performing for an audience. Mom, I've missed you. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted to believe him. So I invited him inside. A few hours later, Melissa arrived too. Then both grandchildren. The house was suddenly full again. Laughter filled the rooms. Voices echoed through hallways that had been silent for years. And for a few beautiful moments, I felt happy. Really happy. I cooked dinner. We shared stories. Everyone smiled. It almost felt like old times. Almost. Then Brian brought up the inheritance. Then Melissa mentioned investments. Then discussions about fair shares began. By dessert, they were arguing over money that wasn't even theirs. I sat quietly and listened. Not one person asked what I planned to do with my life. Not one person asked if I was happy. Not one person apologized for abandoning me. The only thing they cared about was what they might receive. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The silence returned. But something inside me had changed. For years, I blamed myself. I thought maybe I wasn't interesting enough. Maybe I wasn't important enough. Maybe I had somehow failed as a mother. But now I understood the truth. Their absence had never been about me. It had been about what I could provide. And the moment I had something valuable again, they returned. The following week, things became even worse. Brian arrived with paperwork. Melissa arrived with financial plans. Both had ideas for how I should spend my inheritance. Neither seemed interested in what I wanted. Then one evening, I accidentally overheard a conversation that shattered whatever hope I had left. A conversation that revealed exactly how they truly saw me. And after hearing it, I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. That conversation happened by accident. Brian and Melissa were sitting on my back porch while I was inside making coffee. The kitchen window was slightly open. I wasn't trying to listen. But then I heard my name. And everything changed. Just be patient, Brian said. We don't want to push her too hard. Melissa laughed. I know. But honestly, she's sitting on $2 million. What's she going to do with it at her age? At her age. The words hit me like a punch. Then Brian replied, if we're smart, she'll eventually divide most of it between us anyway. Exactly, Melissa said. Let's just keep visiting and make sure we're involved. Keep visiting. Not because they loved me. Not because they missed me. Because it was an investment. A strategy. A business transaction. I stood frozen beside the kitchen counter. My own children. The two people I had sacrificed everything for. The two people I defended even when others criticized them. They weren't seeing me as their mother. They were seeing me as a bank account. For several minutes, I couldn't move. I felt hurt, angry, embarrassed. But most of all, I felt free. Because after years of wondering why I wasn't enough, I finally understood. The problem had never been me. The problem was that they only valued what I could give them. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I thought about my life. I thought about the lonely birthdays. The empty holidays. The hospital stay where nobody came. The countless calls that were never returned. Then I thought about Sarah, the neighbor who checked on me every week. The woman who brought groceries when I was sick. The person who sat beside me when I felt forgotten. She had never asked me for a single dollar. Not once. The next morning, I called my attorney. For nearly 2 hours, we discussed my options. And together, we created a plan. A month later, I invited everyone to my house. Brian arrived smiling. Melissa arrived carrying flowers. My grandchildren came too. Everyone looked excited. They assumed I was finally ready to discuss the inheritance. In a way, I was. After dinner, I handed each person an envelope. The room became silent. Brian opened his first. His smile disappeared. Melissa's expression changed too. Neither envelope contained money. Instead, each contained a letter. A letter explaining exactly how their absence had affected me. A letter describing the birthdays spent alone, the holidays they missed, the pain they never noticed. Several people began crying. But I wasn't finished. Then I handed them copies of my updated estate plan. The attorney had prepared everything. My children would still receive modest inheritances someday. Enough to know I hadn't disowned them. Enough to know I wasn't acting out of revenge. But the majority of my fortune was going elsewhere. Part would fund scholarships for nursing students across Ohio. Part would support senior citizens living alone. And a significant portion would go to Sarah. Not because she expected it. Not because she asked. Because she showed up when nobody else did. The room fell silent. Brian looked stunned. Melissa looked ashamed. For the first time in years, nobody argued. Nobody demanded money. Nobody complained. Because deep down they knew I was right. The following months were difficult. Some relationships remained strained. Others slowly improved. But something unexpected happened. The visits continued. Not every week. Not perfectly. But they continued. And for the first time, money was no longer the subject. Instead, we talked. Really talked. The way families should. Maybe guilt played a role. Maybe they finally understood what they had done. Or maybe they realized that time is more valuable than money. Whatever the reason, things changed. As for me, I stopped waiting by the window. I stopped measuring my worth by who called. I stopped begging for attention. Because I finally learned a lesson that took 63 years to understand. The people who truly love you show up when you have nothing to offer. Not when you have something they want. Today, when I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and watch the sunset over Ohio, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace. Not because I became wealthy. Not because my children changed. But because I finally understood my value. And once I did, everything else followed.